everyone, welcome back. I'm Cole Phillips, author of The Adventure of the Twisted Truths and host of Book and Dagger. Today we're going to be continuing our journey of The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. We are picking up where we left off, chapter 14, Fire and Water. Now, if you wish, like the dwarves, to hear news of Smaug, you must go back again to the evening where he smashed the door and flew off in a rage 2 days before. The men of the Laketown Esgaroth were mostly indoors, for the breeze was always from the black east and chill. But a few were walking on the quays and watching, as they were fond of doing. The stars shine out of the smooth patches of the lake as they opened in the sky. From their town, the lonely mountain was mostly screened by the low hills at the far end of the lake, through a gap in which the running river came down from the north. Only its high peak could they see in clear weather, and they looked seldom at it, for it was ominous and drear even in the light of morning. Now it was lost and gone, blotted in the dark. Suddenly it flickered back to view. A brief glow touched it and faded. "Look," said one, "the lights again. Last night the watchman saw them start and fade from midnight until dawn. Something is happening up there." "Perhaps the king under the mountain is forging gold," said another. "It is long since he went north. It is time the songs began to prove themselves again." "Which king?" said another in a grim voice. "As like as not is the marauding fire of the dragon, the only king under the mountain we have ever known." "You are always foreboding gloomy things," said the others. "Anything from floods to poisoned fish. Think of something cheerful." Then suddenly a great light appeared in the low place of the hills, and the northern end of the lake turned golden. "The king beneath the mountain!" they shouted. "His wealth is like the sun, his silver like a fountain, his rivers golden run. His river is running gold from the mountain!" they cried, and everywhere windows were opening and feet were hurrying. There was once more a tremendous excitement and enthusiasm, but the grim-voiced fellow ran hotfoot to the master. "The dragon is coming, or I am a fool!" he cried. "Cut the bridges! To arms! To arms!" Then warning trumpets were suddenly sounded and echoed along the rocky shores. The cheering stopped and the joy was turned to dread. So it was that the dragon did not find them quite unprepared. Before long, so great was his speed, they could see him as a spark of fire rushing toward them and growing ever huger and more bright, and not the most foolish doubted that the prophecies had gone rather wrong. Still, they had a little time. Every vessel in the town was filled with water, every warrior was armed, every arrow and dart was ready, and the bridge to the land was thrown down and destroyed before the roar of Smaug's terrible approach grew loud, and the lake rippled red as fire beneath the awful beating of his wings. Amid shrieks and wailings and the shouts of men, he came over them, swept toward the bridge, and was foiled. The bridge was gone, and his enemies were on an island in deep water, too deep and dark and cool for his liking. If he plunged into it, a vapor and steam would arise, enough to cover all the land with a mist for days, but the lake was mightier than he. It would quench him before he could pass through. Roaring, he swept back over the town. A hail of dark arrows leaped up and snapped and rattled on his scales and jewels, and their shafts fell back kindled by his breath burning and hissing into the lake. No fireworks you ever imagined equaled the sights that night. At the twanging of the bows and the shilling of the trumpets, the dragon's wrath blazed to its height till he was blind and mad with it. No one had dared to give battle to him for many an age, nor would they have dared now if it had not been for the grim-voiced man, Bard was his name, who ran to and fro, cheering on the archers and urging the master to order them to fight to the last arrow. Fire leaped from the dragon's jaws. He circled for a while high in the air above them, lighting all the lake. The trees by the shore shone like copper and like blood, with leaping shadows of dense black at their feet. Then down he swooped, straight through the arrow storm, reckless in his rage, taking no heed to turn his scaly sides toward his foes, seeking only to set their town ablaze. Fire leapt from thatched roofs and wooden beam ends as he hurtled down, past and round again, though all had been drenched with water before he came. Once more water was flung by 100 hands whenever a spark appeared. Back swirled the dragon. A sweep of his tail and the roof of the great house crumbled and smashed down. Flames unquenchable sprang high into the night. Another swoop, and another house, and then another sprang afire and fell, and still no arrow hindered Smaug or hurt him more than a fly in the marshes. Already men were jumping into the water on every side. Women and children were being huddled into laden boats in the market pool. Weapons were flung down. There was mourning and weeping, where but a little time ago the old songs of mirth to come had been sung about the dwarves. Now men cursed their names. The master himself was turning to his great gilded boat, hoping to row away in the confusion and save himself. Soon all the town would be defeated and burned down to the surface of the lake. That was the dragon's hope. They could all get into boats for all he cared. There he could have fine sport hunting them, or they could stop till they starved. But there was still a company of archers that held their ground among the burning houses. Their captain was Bard, grim-voiced and grim-faced, whose friends had accused him of prophesying floods and poisoned fish, though they knew his worth and courage. He was a descendant in long line of Girion, Lord of Dale, whose wife and child had escaped down the running river from the ruin long ago. Now he shot with a great yew bow, till all his arrows but one were spent. The flames were near him. His companions were leaving him. He bent his bow for the last time. Suddenly, out of the dark, something fluttered to his shoulder. He started, but it was only an old thrush. Unafraid, it perched by his ear, and it brought him news. Marveling, he found he could understand its tongue, for he was of the race of Dale. Wait, wait, it said to him. The moon is rising. Look for the hollow of the left breast as he flies and turns above you. And while Bard paused in wonder, it told him of tidings up the mountain and of all it had heard. Then Bard drew his bowstring to his ear. The dragon was circling back, flying low, and as he came, the moon rose above the eastern shore and silvered his great wings. Arrow, said the bowman, black arrow. I have saved you to the last. You have never failed me, and always I have recovered you. I had you from my father, and he from of old. If ever you came from the forges of the true king out of the mountain, go now, and speed well. The dragon swooped once more lower than ever, and as he turned and dived down, his belly glittered white with sparkling fires of gems in the moon, but not in one place. The great bow twanged. The black arrow sped straight from the string, straight for the hollow by the left breast where the foreleg was flung wide. In it smote and vanished, barbed shaft and feather, so fierce was its flight. With a shriek that deafened men, felled trees, and split stone, Smaug shot, spouting into the air, turned over, and crashed down from on high in ruin. Full on the town he fell. His last throws splintered it to sparks and gleds. The lake roared in. A vast steam leapt up, white in the sudden dark under the moon. There was a hiss, a gushing whirl, and then silence. And that was the end of Smaug and Esgaroth, but not of Bard. Anyway, so all the people in their boats have taken their boats to the forest on the edge of the lake, or they've swum there. And they're all gathering in mournful crowds upon the western shores, shivering in the cold wind, and their first complaints and anger were against the master, who had left the town so soon while some were still willing to defend it. He may have a good head for business, especially of his own business, some murmured, but he is not good when anything serious happens, and they praised the courage of Bard in his last mighty shot. If only he had not been killed, they all said, we would have made him a king, Bard the dragon shooter of the line of Girion. Alas that he is lost. Then, in the midst of their talk, a tall figure stepped from the shadows. He was drenched with water. His black hair hung wet over his face and shoulders, and a fierce light was in his eyes. Bard is not lost, he cried. He died from Esgaroth when the enemy was slain. I am Bard of the line of Girion. I am the slayer of the dragon. King Bard! King Bard! They shouted. The master ground his chattering teeth. Girion was lord of Dale, not king of Esgaroth, he said. In the Laketown we have always elected masters from among the old and wise, and have not endured the rule of mere fighting men. Let King Bard go back to his own kingdom. Dale is now freed by his valor, and nothing hinders his return. And any that wish can go with him, if they prefer the cold stones under the shadow of the mountain to the green shores of the lake. The wise will stay here, and hope to rebuild our town, and enjoy again in time its peace and riches. We will have King Bard, the people near at hand shouted in reply. We have had enough of the old men and the money counters. And people further off took up the cry, up the bowmen and down the money bags, till the clamor echoed along the shore. I am the last man to undervalue Bard the bowman, said the master warily, for Bard now stood close beside him. He has tonight earned an eminent place in the roll of the benefactors of our town, and he is worthy of many imperishable songs. But why, old people? And here the master rose to his feet and spoke very loud and clear. Why do I get all your blame? For what fault am I to be deposed? Who aroused the dragon from his slumber, I might ask? Who obtained us rich gifts and ample help, and let us believe the old songs could come true? Who played on our soft hearts and our pleasant fancies? What sort of gold have they sent down the river to reward us? Dragonfire and rumen. From whom should we claim the recompense of our damage and aid for our widows and orphans? As you see, the master had not got his position for nothing. The result of his words was that for the moment the people quite forgot their idea of a new king and turned their angry thoughts toward Thorin and company. But Bard says they're fools to waste words and wrath on those unhappy creatures, because doubtless they perished first in fire before Smaug came to us. But then he falls to thinking of the gold in the mountain and how he might use it to rebuild Dale. And at length he says, there is no time for angry words, master, or for considering weighty plans of change. There is work to do. I serve you still, though after a while I may think again of your words and go north with any that will follow me. Then he strode off to help in the ordering of the camps and the care of the sick and the wounded. but the master scowled at his back as he went and remained sitting on the ground. He thought much, but said little, unless it was called loudly for men to bring him fire and food. Anyway, so Bard is marching around helping people get shelters erected and find food for people and taking the lead and ordering things as he wished, though always in the master's name. And he's basically he's got an impossible task because all their food's gone, all their shelters are gone, and it's winter. And all the people would have been doomed. But help comes swiftly, for Bard at once had sent speedy messengers up the river to the forest to ask the aid of the king of the elves of the wood, and these messengers had found a host already on the move, though it was then only the third day after the fall of Smaug. The Elven King had received news from his own messengers and from the birds that loved his folk, and already knew much of what had happened. Very great indeed was the commotion among all things with wings that dwelt on the borders of the desolation of the dragon. The air was filled with circling flocks, and their swift flying messengers flew here and there across the sky. Above the borders of the forest there was whistling, crying, and piping. Far over Mirkwood tidings spread. Smaug is dead! Leaves rustled and startled ears were lifted. Even before the Elven King rode forth, the news had passed west, right to the pinnacle of the misty mountains. Beorn had heard it in his wooden houses, and the goblins were at council in their caves. That will be the last we hear of Thorin Oakenshield, I fear, said the king. He would have done better to have remained my guest. It is an ill wind, all the same, he added, that blows no one any good. For he too had not forgotten the legend of the wealth of Thror. So it was that Bard's messengers found him marching with many spearmen and bowmen, and crows were gathered thick above him. They had thought that war was awakening again, such had not been in those parts for a long age. But the king receives Bard's messengers, and he's moved, so he brings people to help out the men of the lake. They arrive there, and they bring food, and they help get shelters set up. And the women and the children, the old and the unfit, and the master remain behind, and with many skilled elven craftsmen, and they busy themselves felling trees and building shelters, while the Elven King and Bard and the men of the lake can fight, and the most of the Elven King's array get ready to march to the mountain. It was thus that in 11 days from the ruin of the town, the head of their host passed the rock gates at the end of the lake and came into the desolate lands. That is the end of chapter 14, and we'll be back with chapter 15 coming soon.